She heard scratching in the heating ducts every night at 2 a.m. When she finally looked inside with a flashlight, something pale with black eyes and too many teeth stared back at her. It had been watching her sleep for months, collecting teeth from missing students. Before we continue, like, comment where you're watching, share, and subscribe.
Jessica Martinez was a sophomore at Ohio State when she got assigned to Morrill Hall, room 314. Nothing special about it, just your typical cramped dorm room with cinder block walls and that permanent smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with teenage desperation. The housing office told her she'd have a roommate named Amanda Chen, international student from Singapore. Quiet, studious type. Perfect, Jessica thought. She needed someone who wouldn't party every night. Jessica moved in on a Tuesday. Amanda's stuff was already there. Clothes in the dresser, textbooks on the desk, even a half-eaten sandwich in the mini fridge. But no Amanda. She's probably at orientation, Jessica told herself. Wednesday came and went. No Amanda. By Friday, Jessica was getting concerned. Amanda's bed hadn't been slept in, but her stuff remained untouched. Jessica asked her RA about it. Amanda Chen? The RA looked confused, flipping through his paperwork. Room 314. You don't have a roommate assigned, Jessica. Jessica felt something cold crawl up her spine. But her stuff is in my room. All of it. Her clothes, her books. The RA followed Jessica back to the room. They unlocked the door together, and Jessica's blood turned to ice water. The room was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Her stuff on one side, empty space on the other. No dresser full of clothes, no textbooks, no half-eaten sandwich, nothing. I don't understand, Jessica whispered. Her stuff was here. I've been looking at it for 3 days. The RA checked his records again. Jessica, you were assigned a single room. You've never had a roommate. Number 3. That night, Jessica barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she could swear she heard someone breathing from the other side of the room. Soft, steady breaths that definitely weren't her own. At 2:47 a.m., she heard the dresser drawers opening and closing. Jessica grabbed her phone's flashlight and pointed it toward the empty side of the room. Nothing there, but she could hear clothes rustling, like someone getting dressed in the dark. "Hello?" she whispered. The rustling stopped immediately. Jessica spent the next day in the library, researching Morrill Hall's history. What she found made her stomach drop. 3 years earlier, a student named Amanda Chen had lived in room 314. International student from Singapore. Quiet, studious type. She'd been found dead in her dorm room shower, electrocuted by a faulty light fixture that the university had been promising to fix for months. The university had quietly settled with her family. No media coverage, no memorial. Just a name scrubbed from the records and a room reassigned, as if nothing had happened. Jessica returned to her dorm that evening to find her mini fridge open. Inside was a half-eaten sandwich that definitely wasn't there that morning. The same type Amanda had been eating when Jessica first arrived, turkey and Swiss on whole wheat, one bite missing. She threw the sandwich away and dead-bolted her door. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Jessica woke to the sound of someone sobbing. Quiet, heartbroken sobs coming from the shower in their shared bathroom. Jessica grabbed her phone and crept toward the bathroom door. The crying was getting louder, more desperate, like someone in terrible pain. She pressed her ear against the door. The sobbing stopped immediately. Then she heard a voice, muffled by the door, but unmistakably clear. "Why won't anyone remember me?" Jessica never opened that door. She packed her things that morning and moved home, forfeiting her tuition and dropping out of college entirely. The university refunded her money without question, almost like they knew exactly why she was leaving. Room 314 in Morrill Hall has remained empty ever since. The university claims it's under renovation, but maintenance workers refuse to enter after dark. They say you can hear someone crying in the shower, begging to be remembered. And sometimes, very late at night, other students in the building report seeing a young Asian woman in the hallways, carrying textbooks and looking for her room. When they try to help her, she looks right through them and whispers, "I don't think I exist anymore." Marcus Thompson was a work-study student at University of Vermont, assigned to night custodial duties in Redstone Hall. Decent gig for a broke college kid. $12 an hour to empty trash and mop floors while everyone else was sleeping. The supervisor, Dale, was this weathered guy in his 60s who'd worked campus maintenance for decades. On Marcus's first night, Dale gave him the tour and one very specific rule. You clean floors 1 through 4. You don't go to the basement, ever. Why not? Marcus asked. Dale's expression went dark. Because some doors are meant to stay locked. For 2 weeks, Marcus followed the rules perfectly. Clock in at 11 p.m., clean the floors, clock out at 3 a.m. Simple routine. But every night, he'd pass the basement door on the ground floor, and every night, he'd hear something that made his skin crawl. Breathing. Deep, rhythmic breathing coming from behind the door, like something massive was sleeping down there. The door itself was strange, thick steel with no windows, secured with 3 different locks. A sign read, "Authorized personnel, only danger." But the weird part wasn't the locks or the sign. It was the scratches. Deep gouges in the metal, like something with claws had been trying to get out. The scratches were fresh too. Marcus could tell because they were bright silver against the old painted steel. On his 3rd week, Marcus worked up the courage to ask Dale about the basement. "What's down there, man?" "I hear breathing every night." Dale stopped mopping and looked at Marcus with genuine fear in his eyes. "Son, there are things in this world that are better left alone. That basement is one of them." "But what is it?" Dale glanced around to make sure they were alone, then whispered. Back in 1987, this building was used for psychology experiments. Graduate students doing research on sensory deprivation, isolation, that kind of thing. They had these underground chambers where they'd keep volunteers in complete darkness for weeks at a time. That's insane. It gets worse. One of the test subjects, a kid named David Reeves, he didn't respond well to the isolation. Started claiming he could see things in the dark, things that weren't there. The researchers thought it was just hallucinations from the sensory deprivation. Dale continued, but David kept getting more violent, started scratching at the walls, clawing at his own skin. The researchers had to sedate him multiple times. Finally, they decided to end the experiment and bring him back up. What happened? When they opened his chamber, David was gone, just vanished. But the walls were covered in scratches, and there was this smell. Dale shuddered. Like something had died and rotted in complete darkness. Marcus felt his throat go dry. Did they find him? 3 days later, a janitor found David in the building's sub-basement. He was alive, but Dale paused. He wasn't human anymore. Whatever had been living in that darkness had changed him. His eyes were completely white. His fingernails had grown into claws, and he moved like an animal. They tried to help him, but David attacked anyone who got close. Bit one of the paramedics so badly they needed surgery. Finally, they had to sedate him, with enough drugs to kill a horse just to get him restrained. Where is he now? Dale looked directly at Marcus. They never took him to a hospital. The university made some kind of deal. David stays in the basement. They provide him with food and water, and nobody talks about it, ever. Marcus laughed nervously.
Come on, man. You're telling me there's some kind of monster living in our basement?
But Dale wasn't laughing. Every night, we slide food through a slot in that door. Every morning, the plate comes back empty. And every night for 37 years. We've heard the same thing you hear. Breathing. That night, Marcus couldn't concentrate on his work. The breathing from the basement seemed louder, more agitated. Around 1 a.m., he heard something new. Scratching. Slow, deliberate scratches against the steel door. Like fingernails or claws, dragging across metal. Marcus crept closer to the basement door. The scratching stopped immediately, but now he could hear something else. Sniffing, like an animal catching a scent. Then, from behind the door, came a voice, raspy and broken, like someone who hadn't spoken in decades. "I can smell you." Marcus ran. The next morning, Marcus found Dale in the maintenance office. "I heard it talk," Marcus said. "It knows I'm there." Dale went pale. "That's not good. David usually ignores the night staff if he's acknowledging you." Dale trailed off. "What?" "He's getting stronger, more aware. That happens sometimes, especially around young people. He feeds off their fear." Marcus wanted to quit, but he needed the money. For the next week, he tried to avoid the basement entirely, but the breathing had turned into whispers. Constant, unintelligible whispers that seemed to follow him throughout the building. Then, on a Friday night, Marcus made a mistake. He was emptying trash on the first floor when he accidentally knocked over his cleaning cart. The crash echoed through the empty hallway, and immediately, the whispers from the basement stopped. Silence. Then, slowly, Marcus heard the sound of multiple locks being turned from the inside. The basement door opened 6 inches, and something pale and thin slid through the gap. At first, Marcus thought it was a hand, but the fingers were too long, the nails too sharp. The thing groped along the floor like it was searching for something. Marcus held his breath, frozen in terror. The pale appendage stretched further into the hallway, revealing an arm that was impossibly elongated and covered in what looked like decades of filth. Then Marcus saw the face. It peered around the doorframe, human-shaped but wrong. The eyes were milky white. The skin was paper-thin and gray, and the mouth was stretched into a permanent, too-wide grin, filled with teeth that had grown sharp from decades of gnawing. The thing that had once been David Reeves looked directly at Marcus and whispered, "I've been so lonely." Marcus doesn't remember how he got out of the building. The next thing he knew, he was in his car, driving home at 90 miles per hour. He never returned to work, and he transferred schools the following semester. Dale found Marcus's abandoned cleaning cart in the hallway the next morning, along with the basement door standing wide open. Inside the basement, they found scratch marks on every surface and a message carved into the concrete wall. "Hungry. So hungry. Send more students." The university sealed the basement with concrete that same week. But students in Redstone Hall still report hearing breathing in the walls, and sometimes, very late at night, they hear scratching from somewhere deep beneath their feet. And every semester, at least one work-study student quits their custodial job without explanation, claiming they heard something calling their name from below. Taylor Kim was a junior at Arizona State, living in Hassayampa Hall with 3 other girls in a quad-style dorm. Nice setup, 4 bedrooms connected by a common area, and shared bathroom. The only weird thing was that the shower in their bathroom ran constantly. Not a full stream, Just a steady drip, drip, drip that the maintenance guys couldn't seem to fix. They'd come by once a week, tinker around for an hour, declare it solved, and by the next morning, the dripping would start again. Old building, they'd say. Old pipes. Taylor didn't mind at first. White noise helped her sleep. But after a few weeks, she started noticing that the water coming from that shower head wasn't exactly clear. It had this rusty tint to it. Maintenance said it was iron deposits in the pipes, completely normal for an old building. They ran tests. Water was safe, they said, just a little discolored. But Taylor had grown up in Phoenix. She knew what iron-tinted water looked like. And this wasn't it. This water was darker, thicker, and it had a smell that reminded her of the time she'd found a dead bird in her backyard as a kid. Her roommates didn't seem bothered by it. Sarah used the shower every morning without complaint. Maya and Jessica didn't mind either. When Taylor mentioned the smell, they looked at her like she was crazy. "What smell?" Sarah would ask. "It smells fine to me." 3 weeks into the semester, Taylor woke up at 4 a.m. to use the bathroom. She could hear the shower running, not just dripping, but actually running. Full stream. She knocked on the bathroom door. "Sarah, you okay in there?" No answer. Taylor tried the handle. The door was unlocked, so she peeked inside. The bathroom was empty, but the shower was running at full blast. The water coming out was dark red, almost black, and it was steaming hot. The entire bathroom was filled with thick, metallic-smelling steam. Taylor reached in to turn off the faucet, but the water was so hot it almost burned her hand. She ran to get a towel to grip the handle, but when she came back, the shower had returned to its normal drip. Clear water, cool temperature, no steam. Taylor convinced herself she'd been dreaming, but the next night it happened again. 4 a.m. exactly. Full blast of dark water, scalding hot, filling the bathroom with that terrible metallic smell. This time, she grabbed her phone and recorded it. 3 minutes of footage showing dark, steaming water pouring from their shower head. When she showed the video to her roommates the next morning, they saw something completely different. "It's just clear water," Sarah said, watching the video. "I don't see anything weird about it." Taylor looked at her phone screen. In the video, the water looked perfectly normal, clear and clean, just like Sarah said. But Taylor remembered what she'd seen, and more importantly, she remembered the smell. That weekend, Taylor decided to do some research. She went to the university archives and looked up the history of Hassayampa Hall. What she found made her blood run cold. In 1994, a student named Jennifer Walsh had been found dead in the 4th floor bathroom shower, the same bathroom Taylor and her roommates were using. Jennifer had been scalded to death by malfunctioning plumbing that had somehow superheated the water to over 180 degrees. The university had settled a wrongful death lawsuit with Jennifer's family and supposedly fixed the plumbing issue. But Taylor found 3 more incidents over the years, students who had been hospitalized for severe burns after using that same shower. All the incidents happened around 4 a.m. All involved water temperatures that should have been impossible given the building's water heater capacity. Taylor printed out the newspaper articles and brought them back to the dorm. She spread them out on her desk and called her roommates over. "Look at this," she said. "4 people have been hurt in our shower. 1 died." Her roommates gathered around, reading the articles. But after a few minutes, Sarah looked up, confused. "Taylor, these are blank pieces of paper." Taylor looked down at her desk. The articles were right there. Headlines, photos, everything. But her roommates were staring at empty white pages. "You guys can't see this?" Taylor whispered. Maya touched Taylor's forehead. "Are you feeling okay? Maybe you should get some rest." That night, Taylor lay in bed, waiting for 4 a.m. She wanted to be ready, to prove she wasn't losing her mind. At exactly 3:59, she crept to the bathroom door and pressed her ear against it. She could hear the shower starting to run, slowly at first, then building to a full blast. She could smell that metallic scent seeping under the door. Taylor grabbed her phone and quietly opened the bathroom door. What she saw made her scream. The shower was running with water so dark it was almost black. Steam filled the room like fog. But standing under the scalding water was a young woman, naked and motionless. The woman's skin was bright red and blistered, with patches of flesh that looked like they'd been boiled away. Her hair was plastered to her skull, and her eyes were wide open but completely white. The woman turned toward Taylor and opened her mouth. Instead of a scream, what came out was the sound of rushing water. Taylor stumbled backward, slamming the bathroom door shut. She could hear water rushing under the door, flooding into their common area. "Help!" Taylor screamed. "Sarah! Maya! Jessica!" Her roommates came running, but when they opened the bathroom door, everything was normal. No running water, no steam, no flooding, and definitely no burned woman standing in their shower. "Taylor, you're scaring us," Sarah said gently. "Maybe you should talk to someone." But Taylor noticed something her roommates hadn't. Their bathroom floor was covered in wet footprints leading from the shower to the door. Small, delicate footprints that definitely weren't any of theirs. And the water was darker than it should be. Not red exactly, but tinted with something that made Taylor's stomach turn. Taylor transferred dorms the next week, claiming a personality conflict with her roommates. She never told anyone the real reason she left. But every night at exactly 4 a.m., her old roommates are awakened by the sound of their shower running. They don't seem to mind. They say the water pressure is great, and it's always the perfect temperature. They just can't figure out why they keep finding long, dark hairs clogging the drain, hair that doesn't belong to any of them. And sometimes, late at night, other students in Hassayampa Hall report seeing a young woman in the 4th floor bathroom, standing under the shower with her mouth open in a silent scream. The maintenance guys won't go near that bathroom after dark. They say the pipes are fine, but something down there is very, very wrong. And the shower never stops running. Brandon Walsh was a freshman at Penn State, living in East Halls with his roommate, Chris. Typical college setup. 2 guys sharing a cramped room with a bathroom down the hall that serviced their entire floor. Brandon was the kind of kid who took his hygiene seriously. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., he'd head down to the communal bathroom to shave and brush his teeth before his 8 a.m. chemistry class. The bathroom was always empty at that hour, which Brandon preferred. Less competition for the sinks, and he could take his time. The mirrors above the sinks were those old institutional types, thick glass with silver backing that had started to spot and fade after decades of use. But they worked fine, and Brandon had gotten into a comfortable routine until the morning he saw the message. It was written in the condensation on the mirror, the kind of message you might leave with your finger on a steamed-up bathroom mirror after a hot shower. Except Brandon hadn't taken a shower. The bathroom wasn't steamy, and the message definitely wasn't there when he'd started shaving. The words were simple, written in shaky capital letters. "Get out." Brandon looked around the empty bathroom, heart starting to pound. "Hello? Anyone in here?" Silence. He looked back at the mirror. The message was gone. Just his reflection staring back at him, razor still in hand, shaving cream half scraped from his face. Brandon convinced himself he'd imagined it. Stress from midterms, maybe. Too much caffeine. He finished shaving and went to class, pushing the incident out of his mind. But the next morning, the message was back. Same mirror, same shaky handwriting, same 2 words: get out. This time, Brandon watched the mirror carefully as he shaved. The message appeared slowly, letter by letter, as if an invisible finger was tracing the words in non-existent condensation. Brandon dropped his razor in the sink. Who's doing this? The bathroom remained empty and silent. But as Brandon stared at the mirror, new words began to appear below the first message. He's watching. Brandon backed away from the sink, but he couldn't stop staring at the mirror. More words were forming, faster now, covering the entire surface of the glass. He sees everything. He knows what you did. He's coming for you. Brandon ran back to his dorm room and shook Chris awake. Dude, there's something wrong with the bathroom. Someone's writing messages on the mirrors. Chris groaned and rolled over. Brandon, it's 6 in the morning. I don't care about bathroom graffiti. No, you don't understand. The messages appear while I'm standing there, like someone's writing them in real time. But there's nobody else in the room. Chris sat up, suddenly more alert. That's actually kind of creepy. Did you tell the RA? Brandon hadn't told the RA because he wasn't sure anyone would believe him. But that afternoon, he mentioned it to some guys on his floor. Most of them laughed it off, but Jake Miller, a sophomore who lived 3 doors down, went pale. Messages on the mirror? Jake asked quietly. Yeah, why? Jake pulled Brandon aside. Look, I don't want to freak you out, but last year there was this incident. Guy named Tommy Rodriguez lived in your room before you. Real quiet kid. Kept to himself mostly. What happened to him? That's the thing. Nobody really knows. Tommy started acting paranoid toward the end of fall semester. Claimed someone was following him, watching him. He'd stay up all night with the lights on, checking the locks on his door over and over. Jake continued. Tommy's roommate said he'd wake up and find Tommy standing at their window, staring out at the courtyard for hours. When anyone asked him about it, Tommy would just say, "He's out there. He knows what I did." Brandon felt ice in his stomach. Those exact words? Yeah. Weird, right? Anyway, Tommy dropped out right before finals. Packed up one night and left without telling anyone. His roommate woke up, and all Tommy's stuff was gone. No note, no goodbye, nothing. Did anyone try to contact him? Jake shook his head. His parents said he never came home. Police opened a missing persons case, but they never found him. It's like he just vanished. That night, Brandon couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those words appearing on the bathroom mirror. He knows what you did. But what had he done? Brandon was a straight-A student from a small town in Ohio. He'd never been in serious trouble, never hurt anyone, never done anything that would warrant this kind of attention. At 3 a.m., Brandon decided he needed to use the bathroom. Not to shave or brush his teeth, just to splash some water on his face and try to calm down. The hallway was dimly lit by emergency lighting, and Brandon's footsteps echoed on the polished floor. He pushed open the bathroom door and flicked on the lights. All 6 mirrors above the sinks were covered in messages. Not just words this time, but sentences, paragraphs, an entire story written in that same shaky handwriting, covering every inch of reflective surface. Tommy Rodriguez was driving home from a party. He'd been drinking. He hit someone on Route 322. Kept driving, never told anyone. But I've always been watching. Now it's your turn. Brandon's legs went weak. He stumbled backward, but more words were appearing on the mirrors behind him. Room 237 before Tommy. Room 237 after Tommy. Room 237 is cursed. Everyone who sleeps there sees their secrets, pays for their sins. Brandon ran back to his room, but he couldn't escape what he'd seen. The messages were burned into his memory, and worse than that, they were making him think about things he'd tried to forget. Like the night he'd been driving home from Sarah Peterson's party junior year of high school. He'd only had 2 beers. He was fine to drive, but it was dark, and he'd been texting. And when he looked up, there was something in the road. Not someone. Something. Maybe a dog. Maybe a cat. He'd felt the bump, heard the sound, but when he stopped and got out to look, there was nothing there. No body, no blood, nothing. He'd convinced himself he'd imagined it. Hit a pothole, maybe. But now, staring at those words on the mirror, Brandon wasn't so sure. The next morning, Brandon found a note slipped under his door. Not typed or printed. Handwritten in that same shaky script he'd seen on the mirrors. Sarah Peterson's cat mittens went missing September 15th, 2019. Same night as her party. Same night you drove home drunk. Mittens was found 3 days later on Route 27, half a mile from Sarah's house. Broken neck, tire tracks, 2 and a mile, 2. Brandon's hands were shaking as he read the note. At the bottom, in larger letters, I know what you did, and now everyone will know too. Brandon transferred schools that week, just like Tommy Rodriguez had dropped out the year before. He told his parents he wanted to be closer to home, but the real reason was that he couldn't escape the messages. They followed him everywhere, not just mirrors now, but windows, phone screens, any reflective surface. Always the same shaky handwriting, always revealing secrets he thought he'd buried. The room 237 in East Halls remains occupied, but students rarely last more than a semester. The current resident, a kid named Alex Chen, has started asking his friends strange questions about hit-and-run accidents and missing pets. And every morning at 6 a.m., someone finds new messages written on the bathroom mirrors. Messages that reveal the darkest secrets of whoever is unlucky enough to sleep in room 237. The university has replaced those mirrors 4 times in the past 3 years, but within a week of installation, the messages always return. Because some secrets refuse to stay buried. And in room 237, all secrets eventually come to light. Winter quarter at Northwestern University was brutal, and the heating system in Bob Hall was struggling to keep up. Students on every floor complained about their rooms being freezing, but nobody's room was colder than Melissa Chen's. Melissa was a senior, living in a single room on the 3rd floor. She'd requested the single because she needed quiet to work on her thesis, but by February, she was seriously regretting the decision. Her room was so cold she could see her breath, even with the thermostat cranked up to maximum. The weird thing was that her heating vent was actually working. Hot air was blowing out constantly, but somehow the room never got warm. It was like the heat was being sucked away as fast as it arrived. Melissa reported the problem to maintenance multiple times, but every time they checked, they said the heating system was functioning perfectly. Must be poor insulation, they'd say. Old building. But Melissa knew something else was wrong. Because of the noises. Every night around 2 a.m., she'd hear scratching and scrabbling sounds coming from inside the heating ducts. At first, she assumed it was mice or rats. Old buildings always had rodent problems. But these sounds were too big, too coordinated. It sounded like something was crawling through the ductwork. something large enough to block the flow of hot air. Melissa mentioned the noises to her neighbor, Katie, who lived in the room next door. "Oh my God, yes," Katie said. "I hear it too. It's like something's living in the walls. But maintenance says there's nothing there." "Have you actually seen anyone from maintenance check the ducts?" Katie paused. "You know what? No. They always just check the thermostat and say everything's fine. I don't think they've ever actually looked inside the ductwork." That night, Melissa decided to investigate for herself. Around 1:45 a.m., she positioned herself next to the heating vent with her phone's flashlight ready. If something was in there, she was going to get proof. At exactly 2 a.m., the scratching started. Slow, deliberate scraping sounds moving through the ducts toward her room. Melissa held her breath and pointed her flashlight into the vent. At first, she saw nothing but the typical metal ductwork. But as the scratching sounds got closer, something moved in the shadows. It was pale and thin, pressed flat against the bottom of the duct. As Melissa watched in horror, the thing slowly turned toward her light. It had a face, human features, but wrong somehow. The skin was gray and stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. The eyes were completely black, no white visible at all. And the mouth was open in what might have been a scream, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too many. The thing stared directly at Melissa through the vent, and she realized it had been watching her all along. Every night, every time she slept. Melissa stumbled backward, dropping her phone. When she picked it up and pointed the light back at the vent, the thing was gone. But she could hear it moving deeper into the ductwork, toward other rooms. Melissa spent the rest of the night sitting in her desk chair, staring at the heating vent. She called maintenance first thing in the morning and demanded they inspect the ducts immediately. "Ma'am, we've told you multiple times. There's nothing wrong with your heating system. I saw something in the ductwork. Something living." The maintenance supervisor sighed. "We'll send someone over this afternoon." But when the maintenance worker arrived, he only checked the thermostat again and declared everything perfectly normal. "Did you actually look inside the ducts?" Melissa asked. "Don't need to. System's working fine." That evening, Melissa borrowed a screwdriver from her RA and removed the vent cover herself. If maintenance wouldn't investigate, she would. The ductwork was larger than she'd expected, big enough for a person to crawl through if they were thin enough. Using her phone's flashlight, Melissa peered as far into the system as she could. The metal surfaces were scratched, like something with claws had been crawling through them for years. But more disturbing were the other things she found. Shreds of fabric that looked like old clothing, strands of hair in different colors and textures, and small white objects that made Melissa's stomach turn. Teeth. Human teeth. Melissa grabbed as much evidence as she could and went straight to campus security. She spread everything out on the desk. Photos of the scratches, the fabric scraps, even one of the teeth. "There's something living in the heating ducts of Bob Hall," she said. "It's been collecting trophies." The security officer, an older man named Frank, examined the items carefully. His expression grew increasingly troubled. "Miss Chen, how long have you been hearing these noises?" "Since the beginning of winter quarter, about 6 weeks." Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a thick file folder from his desk drawer. "We've had reports about Bob Hall for years," he said quietly. "Students going missing, strange noises in the walls, heating problems that can't be explained. But the university doesn't want us investigating too thoroughly." Frank opened the file and showed Melissa a stack of missing person reports, all from students who had lived in Bob Hall over the past decade. Jennifer Walsh, 2019. Last seen in her dorm room. Security footage shows her entering the building, but she never left. Marcus Rodriguez, 2020. Roommate said he heard Marcus talking to someone in the middle of the night, but when he woke up, Marcus was gone. David Kim, 2021. Complained about his room being cold and hearing noises in the walls for weeks before he disappeared. Melissa felt sick. How many? 12 students in the past 10 years, all from Bob Hall. All reported heating problems before they vanished. Frank leaned forward. The thing is, we've tried to investigate, but every time we send maintenance into those ducts, they find nothing. And anyone who gets too close to the truth ends up transferring schools or dropping out entirely. What do you think it is? Frank shook his head. I don't know, but I think it's been living in that building for a very long time, and it's gotten smart about hunting. It knows the building layout better than any of us. It knows which rooms are isolated, which students won't be missed right away. Why haven't you shut down the building? The university won't authorize it. Too expensive to relocate all those students. They'd rather pretend there's no problem. That night, Melissa packed her essential belongings and prepared to leave Bob Hall permanently. She'd rather fail her thesis than become victim number 13. But as she was loading her suitcase into her car, she heard screaming from the building behind her. Katie's voice, coming from the 3rd floor, coming from inside the walls. Melissa ran back into the building and up to Katie's room. The door was open, and Katie's roommate was standing in the middle of the room, staring at the heating vent in terror. It took her, the roommate whispered. She was sleeping, and I heard the scraping sound. And when I looked over, something was pulling her into the vent. I could hear her screaming from inside the walls, getting fainter and fainter until... The roommate couldn't finish the sentence. Security arrived within minutes, but their search of the ductwork revealed nothing. No sign of Katie, no evidence of struggle, nothing but those same scratch marks and a few more teeth that hadn't been there before. Melissa transferred to a different university that week, but she still has nightmares about what she saw in those ducts. And sometimes, when she's alone in her new apartment, she swears she can hear scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. Bob Hall remains open and fully occupied. The university has installed new heating systems twice in the past year, but students still complain about cold rooms and strange noises. And every semester, at least one student goes missing. Always someone who complained about heating problems. Always someone who lived alone. The maintenance staff refuses to work on the building after dark, and security guards won't patrol the upper floors by themselves. They say if you listen carefully on quiet nights, you can hear crying coming from somewhere deep inside the walls. Crying, and the sound of something very large crawling through spaces far too small for any human to survive. But whatever is living in the heating ducts of Bob Hall has learned to make itself fit, and it's always hunting for its next meal. 5 dormitories. 5 horrors that universities tried to bury. 5 reasons why some students never make it to graduation. Amanda Chen still haunts room 314, begging to be remembered. David Reeves grows stronger in his concrete tomb, waiting for someone young and afraid to feed his hunger. The thing in Hasayampa's shower continues to scald anyone brave enough to bathe at 4 a.m. Room 237 reveals every dark secret of its occupants, and the creature in Bob Hall's heating ducts adds new teeth to its collection every semester. These aren't just stories. These are warnings. Because if you're living in a dormitory right now, listening to this in the dark, you need to ask yourself, what's that scratching sound in your walls? Why is your room always so cold? And who or what is that reflection staring back at you from your mirror? Some doors should never be opened. Some rooms should never be entered, and some secrets should never be shared. But we shared them with you anyway. Sweet dreams. This is Dread Dynasty. And remember, you're never really alone in a dormitory, even when you think you are. If these stories sent a chill down your spine, like the video, it helps more horror lovers discover our tales. Subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss what's hiding in the dark. Share this video with someone who swears they're not afraid of the dark. Let's test that. And remember, some stories don't end when the lights come back on. This is Dread Dynasty.